Владимир Путин во время телефонного разговора с премьер-министром Израиля.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in a phone call this week, told Russian President Vladimir Putin he was displeased with Russia's, quote, anti-Israel stance. It was the first overt signal that his relationship with the Russian autocrat was deteriorating since the October 7 attack and the ensuing war in Gaza, in which Moscow is increasingly seen as explicitly siding with Hamas. In October, Israel's Institute for National Security Studies called for Israel to change its policy and stand unequivocally with the United States in support of Ukraine, after it found Russia to be turning a blind eye to Iranian shipments of Russian weapons to Hamas, including anti-tank and surface-to-air missiles.
פוטין התייצב לצד חמאס ולא גינה ולא במילה אחת את הזוועות שביצעו המחבלים בשטח ישראל. על רקע תמיכת ארצות הברית באופן חסר תקדים בישראל ותמיכת רוסיה בחמאס, אין אפשרות יותר לישראל להיות ניטרלית כלפי רוסיה.
The fallout could impact theaters far beyond the Gaza Strip, as observers predict closer cooperation between Israel and Ukraine, a more aggressive stance with Russia's ally Iran, and the end of deconfliction courtesy calls when Israel strikes inside Syria. But things were not always so. As recently as 2019, Netanyahu touted his relationship with the Russian leader with a towering billboard that depicted the two men next to each other. Under Netanyahu, Israel has bolstered Russia's position by refusing to join Western economic sanctions against Moscow and declining to provide Ukraine's military with assistance. A leader in Netanyahu's own party, the Likud, thinks that's all about to change. Amir Weitman, who heads the Likud's Libertarian Caucus, surprised a host on Russian state-owned news network RT in October with accusations of Russian involvement in the operation that left 1,200 Israelis dead and 240 as hostages.
Would you calm down?
Russia will
pay the price.
Russia is supporting the enemies of Israel. Russia is supporting Nazi people who want to commit genocide on us, and just Russia will pay the price. Russia also. Now listen to me very carefully. We are going to finish with these Nazis. We're going to win this war. It's going to take the time it's going to take, but we're going to win this war. Afterwards, we're not forgetting what you are doing. We're not forgetting. We will come. We will make sure that Ukraine wins. We will make sure that you pay the price for what you have done.
I spoke to Weitman shortly after the Prime Minister's office issued its statement on Netanyahu's phone call with Putin and asked him if he felt things were still headed towards a confrontation with Russia.
People who have doubts now need to understand that I'm being vindicated by what's happening. The Prime Minister Netanyahu expressed his displeasure. The word in Hebrew is morat rucho. It's it's displeasure, I think.
Do you think the statement he made after the conversation with Putin went far enough, in your opinion?
So, nobody's insulting each other, but it's extremely harsh. There's no denying that such an announcement would not have come before the 7th of October. At no point, nothing close to that. But of course, Israeli officials have to be much more careful than I am. Well, that's clear, but I think it will be at the same time very clear that as we carry on playing the diplomatic games should be accompanied by power, and they will understand that.
Until now, Israel has justified its reluctance to help allies wrestle with the threat posed by Russia because of its unique security situation.
Israel has been trying since 2022, in the beginning of the war, to thread a fine line between doing what we know is right, which is to support Ukraine. Everybody knows that, of course. But also, on the other hand, avoid getting entangled in a fight which, at the end of the day, is not ours, when we have got a lot of, on our own plate, as everybody can see.
I think you're saying that it was a tactical necessity for Israel not to irritate Russia ahead of October 7th. But was it really a necessity for Netanyahu to campaign with a giant poster of himself standing next to Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, but that was before 2022. Wow, that was before 2022. He did not campaign like that now. He campaigned a few years ago, and it was a mistake. I never particularly liked it, but I never thought it's that bad. But yes, in hindsight, it was bad. But to be fair, I think that nobody thought before February 2022 that actually Russia would invade Ukraine the way they did. I think this came as a surprise to many people.
The war in Ukraine actually started in 2014, and even to people who aren't close observers of that fact, it's obvious because the United States imposed sanctions against Russia, and the United States is allegedly an ally of Israel and vice versa. Yet, even after the full-scale invasion of 2022, Israel has not imposed any kind of economic sanctions, in coordination with its allies against Russia. And in fact, a lot of business from Russia that can't operate in the West has fled to Israel. Is that embarrassing for the Likud now?
It was a situation where Israel had no choice. And by the way, it's not only Netanyahu. Let me remind you that that Netanyahu was not in power. He was in opposition at the time of the invasion in February 2022. I think it was the national interest of Israel to try to avoid being entangled in something which is potentially very harmful for us. Russia is the party which decided, in this case, to attack Israel. They decided for their own reasons, because I don't know exactly, probably because Iran has been very instrumental in helping them in the war, because they want to divert attention away from Ukraine. But if we reach a point where there's more calm in this region a few months from now, and there's still a war ongoing, I'm sure Israel will find a way to get Ukraine to get significant weapon systems into Ukraine's hands, so that Russia understands that there is a price to be paid, as I said.
Weitman isn't suggesting that Russia helped Hamas plan the attack or even knew it was going to happen. He's saying Russia's behavior before and after the attacks has made it clear whose side Moscow is on.
У нас дружеские отношения с Палестиной на протяжении десятилетий. Это наши друзья знают об этом.
On October 8th, one day after the massacre of Israelis, senior Hamas official Ali Baraka told Russia Today Hamas had updated Moscow about the operation as soon as it began, but Russia didn't condemn it. Hamas's leader Khalid Mashal then claimed the Russians were so impressed with the operation that they planned to teach it in their military academies. Israelis were further outraged by a Hamas delegation that visited Moscow at the end of October.
עכשיו מרזוק היה במוסקבה, עכשיו הם חיבקו אחד את השני. הרוסים כרגע הם כוח אקטיבי לצד האיראנים, לצד חיזבאללה וחמאס בפעולות נגד מדינת ישראל, גם בתחום התודעה וגם בתחום ההשפעה.
A lot of the weapons used to attack Israel were made in Russia, or were sold to the Hamas or given to the Hamas through Russia, either directly or indirectly. It is clear that they got trainings from the Russia over the past years. So, and they've been given political support from Russia. Everywhere on Russian TV, everything, you can see that Russia has increased dramatically its hatred of Jews and of Israel. There is a certain measure of public opinion, but this is a public opinion which is being directed by the Kremlin directly, by the regime.
Some of the evidence that Russia has been arming Hamas doesn't come from Israeli sources, according to Jonathan Weiner, a former U.S. Special Envoy to Libya and ex-Deputy Assistant Secretary of State.
I only know what I was able to find from open source material, like the Palestinian Arms Bazaar in Gaza in the summer of 2023, first ever, in which they show all kinds of weapons in an open air market setting to ordinary residents in Gaza. And the headline in the Palestinian news article about it is, "Made in Gaza, made in Russia." That's in July. Made in Gaza, made in Russia.
The article in the Palestine Chronicle includes photographs of all kinds of weapons, including drones, missile launchers, anti-aircraft launchers, none of which are definitively Russian-made. But the text of the story says Russian Kornet anti-tank missiles were on display. Israel's former ambassador to Russia, Arkady Milman, who authored the INSS paper calling for Israel to throw its lot in with Ukraine, believes Russia benefits from the Gaza war because it distracts the US from what's happening in Ukraine.
עכשיו, לרוסים, מה האינטרס? קודם כל, להסיט תשומת לב מהמלחמה באוקראינה למלחמה כאן, כי אז הציר הזה, ציר הרשע, רוסיה, איראן, חיזבאללה, חמאס, צפון קוריאה, הציר הזה מתחיל להתגבש, ואז הוא פועל, ולכל אחד יש אינטרס משלו, שזה בסדר, אבל אנחנו כאן, זה המלחמה ההיברידית, נגדנו, נגד התודעה שלנו, ואנחנו צריכים להיות מודעים.
Israeli military analyst David Sharp thinks relations still have some ways to go before they hit bottom. Everything hinges on whether Jerusalem perceives Russia to have crossed certain red lines in Iran. In other words, if it gives Tehran technology that poses an existential threat to Israel.
Я, кстати, думаю, во многом об этом говорили Нетаньяху с Путиным буквально пару дней назад. В день после разговора Путина и Нетаньяху телефонным был мощный удар в районе Дамаска. Израиль его традиционно официально не признал. Нетаньяху было важно сказать Путину, что вот там происходят такие дела, которые мы больше терпеть не можем.
One tangible consequence of the worsening relationship, according to Sharp, is that Israel may have already stopped informing Russian forces in Syria about strikes it carries out against the Assad regime and Hezbollah forces there, which it previously did to avoid accidentally harming Russian troops and angering Moscow.
Если стороны, что называется, разругаются совсем, и отношения с ними друг с другом крайне враждебны, у Израиля есть самые разные возможности попортить России жизнь на Ближнем Востоке, теоретически вплоть до чего угодно. Но для этого должно вот произойти еще какие-то, как мне видится, дополнительные шаги, и все упирается, почти все упирается в Иран. Если узнает, что Россия перешла некие барьеры и красные линии, тогда терять нечего. И тогда, собственно, пошло-поехало. Силы России в регионе совершенно ничтожны в сравнении с израильскими. Однако Россия присутствует в Сирии, и есть рычаги, скажем так, и тайных операций, и сговора с кем-то из врагов, да какие угодно есть рычаги на Ближнем Востоке, которые могут повредить тем или иным интересам, экономическим, военным и политическим.
But with Israel still at the top of the agenda and Republicans unwilling to pass further funding for Ukraine's war effort in Congress, Putin's gamble seems, at least for the time being, to be paying off.